pass S 1471.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 1471, an act to authorize the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and the Secretary of the Army to reconsider decisions to inter or honor the memory of a person in a national cemetery and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, and the gentleman from Maine, Mr. Mushu, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members would have 5 legislative days with which to revise and extend their remarks and add any extraneous material and include that material in Senate 1471.
Without objection,
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
the gentleman from Florida is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of Senate 1471, the Alicia Dawn Koehl Respect for National Cemeteries Act. This bill would grant authority to the Department of Veterans Affairs to reconsider the decision to inter or memorialize an individual within a national cemetery in situations where it is later discovered that the deceased committed a capital crime. Currently, Section 2411 of Title 38, the United States Code prohibits the interment or memorialization of persons who committed a federal or state capital crime. Nonetheless, situations have arisen where the entity, such as a funeral home or the individual who is charged with scheduling the interment or memorialization of a decedent, either does not know of the decedent's crime or does not truthfully report such crime to federal cemetery officials. In situations where a funeral home had no knowledge that a decedent was involved in a capital crime at the time of the burial request, VA actually lacks statutory authority to reconsider interment or memorialization decisions. Simply put, individuals who are buried or memorialized within national cemeteries cannot be disinterred on the basis of subsequently received information. Mr. Speaker, S 1471 would provide this authority to VA as well as to the Department of Defense in the case of Arlington National Cemetery. VA supports this bill as it would provide the department with the ability to redress interment cases where eligibility is invalidated by information that is learned after a burial. This bill would also specifically direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to disinter the remains of Michael LaShawn Anderson from Fort Custer National Cemetery, as it was Mr. Anderson who murdered Alicia Dawn Koehl prior to taking his own life. In that case, the funeral home charged with Mr. Anderson's burial was unaware of the incident. Thus, they did not properly report the crime, and Fort Custer National Cemetery provided a military funeral. The interment of Mr. Anderson was brought to the attention of the Indiana congressional delegation, and I want to thank my colleague, Ms. Brooks, for highlighting this tragic incident and for offering companion legislation to S 1471. I also want to thank our colleagues in the Senate for addressing this need and for passing Senate 1471. I encourage all of my colleagues to support this legislation. At this time, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves his time. The gentleman from Maine, Mr. Mushu, is recognized.